and today we will be tackling Unit 4, Module 5, 6, and 7. But I will be covering Module 5, which focuses on fallacies, which the counterfeit arguments.
Alright, so I'll be tackling about the Module 5, focuses on the fallacies and counterfeit arguments. And hopefully after this module, you will be able to identify what are the type of fallacies and you'll be able to avoid them. So let's talk about fallacies. What are the fallacies actually? So fallacies are actually common errors in reasoning that will undermine the logic of your argument. Fallacies can be either illegitimate or arguments or irrelevant points. So which means that fallacies are parang kumbaga para sa mga excuses or reasonings that doesn't have any supporting documents at all. So actually, for our module, we will be able to, or we're gonna talk about one story only para mas maintindihan natin yung ibig sabihin ng per argument or per types of argument. So we're gonna talk about Uncle Fred. So si Uncle Fred, ang pambansang tito. Okay, so let's start off with the story. So euthanasia. Suppose you're in a hospital engaged in a serious and heated debate about the merits or demerits of euthanasia or mercy killing with your family members. The patient concerned is your uncle on your father's side. His name is Uncle Fred. He has been in coma for almost 5 months now. So, comatose na siya for 5 months. And dahil sa iyong compassion or because of your compassion of your uncle, you propose euthanasia because of the following reasons. First, Uncle Fred does not have any controls of his faculties anymore. Two, Uncle Fred is already terminal. Third, he's been suffering and in terrible pain. Fourth, wala nang medical option to relieve his suffering. And then fifth, the patient is being kept alive by artificial means, life support system or machines. You conclude that it is best interest of Uncle Fred to remove the life support system so that nature can take its course, and you can allow Uncle Fred to die in dignity and peacefully. This is the humane and kind thing to do. However, your family members does not accept your opinion, or it does not accept the way or yung point mo regarding with Uncle Fred. So we're gonna talk about the first argumentum, and this was committed by one of your auntie. Okay, so ang sabi ni auntie, I understand why you're proposing to murder your Uncle Fred. You have never been close to him. You're close to your other uncles, especially on your mother's side. Now I know you hate your Uncle Fred. You have an evil mind and a heart of stone. So si auntie, nag-commit siya ng argumentum ad hominem. In English, it means argument directed to the person. So it occurs whenever the character or circumstances of an individual who is advancing an argument is criticized instead of seeking to disprove the argument provided. So si argumentum ad hominem ay pinafocus nito is yung character, personality, and beliefs ng opponent. So, to the point or on the point of auntie na sinabi niya na you have an evil mind and a heart of stone. So, ibig sabihin nito, tinatarget nito yung personality or yung character ni mo towards kay Uncle Fred. So, yun ang argumentum ad hominem. Another example is, for example, you have someone or you have a friend not being uh, ayoko mag-discriminate, pero we are using this, it's just for an example. So, for example, we have a friend who has a lot of tattoos, earrings, and the ears have a big, like a huge hole because of the earrings. And then all of a sudden, there's a Karen passes by. And then Karen uh, accused your friend, telling him that he's a robber and that he had stolen Karen's money. When the authorities asked Karen, why do you think this person stole your money? And Karen said, it's because he looks like a robber. He has tattoos and all. That is argumentum ad hominem, which means that you're attacking the person physically because of his physical feature. You're telling them, or you're actually jumping into conclusion, he's a robber because he has a lot of tattoos, and he has a lot of earrings, and he looks like one. Okay, so that is argumentum ad hominem. And now we're gonna proceed with argumentum ad baculum. Okay, so si father, biglang sumagot si daddy mo, si daddy. Okay, ang sabi ni daddy, if you persist in this line of reasoning, I will disinherit you, throw you out of the house, stop your schooling, and not talk to you ever again. You're putting me in a bad light with my brothers and sisters by suggesting that your Uncle Fred be murdered. That is argumentum ad baculum. In other words, appeals to the use of force. Which means, in this type, or in this very moment, you're using, or you are threatening someone because of their point of view, or you're forcing them. Okay, so sa point dito, si daddy, sinabi niya na sabi niya he will disinherit, throw you out of the house, stop schooling. It's like stop the support at all. That is argumentum ad baculum. So you are actually opposing someone's point of view by force, by putting them, or by giving them like a specific result on what will happen if ever you're going to continue with your argument. Another example for that one is, for example, there is a principal and then there's a teacher. They're talking to one another. And then this teacher is actually trying to, she's trying to fail a kid because it's obviously, or their grades is obviously failing. Okay. However, the parents of this kid is one of the people who are giving a lot of money to support the foundation of the school. So when you open up, or when you open this up to your principal, okay, your principal said, you better think about it. If you're gonna fail this kid, you know what will happen. You know who his parents are. That is a threat, and that is appeal to force, or threat of force. That if ever you're gonna fail a kid, there's something will happen. Okay, and now let's proceed with argumentum misericordiam. Okay, so this one, sumagot na si mother. Sumali na si mother sa discussion niya. Okay. Sabi ni mother, what happened to you, my son? Don't you have any compassion for your uncle? Think of his 6 children. What will happen to them without your father? Is there no pity in your heart? Life is the most precious possession of human being. As long as a person is alive, there is a chance that he might live. A miracle might happen. Are you depriving your uncle of this chance? Okay, so with the argumentum ad misericordiam, this means in other words, appeals to pity, which means you're putting so much guilt um to the person you're having argument to. Okay? So dalawa lang yan. It's either you're giving them guilt, para mga guilty sila sa sinasabi nila, or you're making yourself pity para makuha mo yung approval nila sa argument. That is argumentum ad misericordiam. Okay? For example na lang, yung kapag nag-decide ka na mag-move out sa inyo, okay? You told your parents, Ma, Pa, I wanted to move out. And then they're gonna tell you, what? Why are you moving out? What's the problem? Is there, nagkulang ba kami? So, ganun-ganun na lang yon. All of these years we've been living, or we've been making you live. We support you. We let you go to the school. Wala na lang yon. That is argumentum ad misericordiam. They are making their self-pity, and they're putting you in a guilty situation. Let's move on. Alright, so argumentum and ignortium. Sinuport ni uncle mo, yung sinabi ni mother mo kanina na regards with the argumentum ad misericordiam. Ang sabi ni tito mo, son, there is always hope. You're big enough and intelligent enough to know that anybody or nobody has succeeded in disproving the existence of miracle, to therefore miracles exist. You should not deny your uncle Fred his miracles of life. At yan, si uncle mo, nag-commit siya ng argumentum ad ignortium. In other words, argument from ignorance. Which means na nagpo-provide siya ng information or ng argument na wala namang proof. Miracles, they're either true or not. No one had actually proved it that it's true. No one had proved it that it's not. Another example of argumentum ad ignorantiam is that when you Jessica Soho, when they're lunching, or when they're showing everyone that aliens exist, because one barangay saw that there is a fireball floating in the middle of the rice fields. That is argumentum ad ignorantiam. Even though actually yes, there's a lot of people saw it, but there's no specific and scientific proof regarding with everyone saw. It's either true, that has not been proven false, or it's false but no one has proven it yet. It's either false but no one has been proven that it wasn't true at all. Okay, and let's go ahead and go with argumentum ad populum. Ayan, nakisali na yung mga ibang auntie mo, yung mga tita mo. Sabi ng isang tita mo, can you imagine what will happen if you follow as you suggested? Remove the life support system and let your Uncle Fred die. Son, we are Catholics. We value human more than any material things in the world. Are you suggesting that we abandon the time-honored traditional value and murder Uncle Fred? So argumentum ad populum, in other words, appeal to popularity and traditional institution. So in this case, yung isa sa mga auntie mo, she's Catholic. Okay, and she's providing argument that provides, or that actually appeal to popularity. Dahil in Catholic, you're not allowed to kill, right? You're not allowed to you are considered like a murderer if you're gonna remove this life support of your Uncle Fred. Okay, that is argumentum ad populum. Okay, and it's already like tradition na kasi na kapag ka tinanggal mo yung life support, considered as murder, murderer ka na. And you will not be accepted by the Catholic Church. Okay? Next, sa argumentum ad verecundiam na kinomit naman ng isang tito mo ay sinuportahan niya si tita mo na nagsabi na Catholic sila at hindi yun pinapaboran dahil they value human life. Sumagot si tito mo ngayon. Ang sabi niya, if we remove the life support system, do you think the Catholic Church will allow such a cruel decision? Surely not. The Church believes in miracle. The Church would tell you that a medical breakthrough can happen anytime that will cure your uncle. Let us continue hoping and have faith in our Church. So if you're gonna take a look of this phrase that uncle had told us, hindi lang argumentum ad verecundiam ang kinamit niya. He also committed argumentum ad ignorantiam. Kasi, nag-conclude siya na, or nandun na naman yung miracle. Which is, it's either not true or not false. And in Uncle's point of view, okay, it's fallacious because we are believing into a wrong authority. Okay? Kasi sabi niya dito, he believes in miracles and the church. So, ang authority dito is yung church, yung Catholic Church. Okay? The Catholic Church said that a medical breakthrough can happen anytime. They are insisting that the claim is true because the Catholic Church said so. Okay. Now, let's proceed with the next one. Ito medyo complicated to because tatlo sila. And they are interconnected to one another. Let's first know more about straw man, red herring, and false analogy. So straw man fallacy occurs when someone takes another person's argument or point, distorts it, or exaggerates it in some kind of like extreme way. Okay. Red herring is attempting to redirect the argument to another issue to which the person doing the redirecting can better respond. And false analogy is the argument draws the conclusion from observed cases that are only superficially or apparently similar to the unobserved cases about which the conclusion is being drawn. Now let's see. Let's see what does Mama said. Okay, unto you. Sumagot ulit si Mother. Ang sabi ni Mother, you attempt to justify removing the life support system is horrifying. That is straw man fallacy. Take note of that. But we're gonna discuss that more later. So, let's repeat. Your attempt to justify the removing the life support system is horrifying. You devalue human life. You look at your Uncle Fred like a horse who broke leg, and since the horse is now useless, he deserves to die. May I suggest that the person we're talking about is human being with intrinsic worth and not a horse who has served his usefulness. Okay. So, going back, yung pinaka main point na straw man dito is yung regarding with you, the value human life. Okay, that is straw man fallacy. And, oh, actually, I'm wrong. The straw man fallacy falls into human being with intrinsic worth, and not a horse who has served as usefulness. That is a strawman fallacy, which exaggerating. They're actually exaggerating their claim or their point. And then the red herring fallacy is you devalue human life. And the false analogy is comparing your Uncle Fred to a horse who broke a leg. That is false analogy. Uncle Fred is way more, or it's far more to, like, masyadong malayo sa horse, right? And it's a two different thing. First of all, Uncle Fred doesn't broke his leg. He's actually on coma for 5 months. And horse, it's a different thing because horse has a broken leg. It's not even dying. He just have a broken leg. Though sinabi naman niya dito sa point ni mother na uh, that Uncle Fred is not a horse, but the point is she exaggerated it. She exaggerated the point or the claim on the argument. Now we're gonna proceed with the slippery slope fallacy. So slippery slope fallacy, this is very, very common, and you can also see this on a Filipino culture. We're gonna talk more about that. So let's see here what does the father says na gumamit kanina ng force, ng argumentum ad baculum. Dinagdagan niya pa. Okay. So, according to father, how can you make such proposal? If we allow you to do it to your Uncle Fred, you will do it also to me? To your mother? To all of your relatives and friends? Where will it stop? Are we going to kill everybody who outlive his or her usefulness? The terminal ill? The aged? The crippled? And the infirm? What about the fatally deformed infants? Fatally deformed infants? Are you going to deprive them of their right to life? I hope you see now how wrong your proposal is. So just like I've told you, slippery slope fallacy is like a domino effect. It's a domino effect na parang, pag ginawa mo to sa akin, gagawin mo din sa kanya, gagawin mo sa lahat. That is slippery slope fallacy. Another example of slippery slope fallacy is the Filipino quote na kung sino ang puno, siya ang bunga. And it happens all the time. For example, I'm sorry for the word. For example, there's someone, her mother is a whore. Pokpok siya. Then she gave birth. And then this girl, she will be tagged as pokpok as well because her mother is pokpok. That is slippery slope fallacy. And they're gonna tag that little girl, like all of your children's children will be pokpok as well. Kasi yung mother mo kalad ka rin. That is slippery slope fallacy, which means that you're doing or you're actually giving domino effects. That's not really necessary. Now, we're gonna proceed with fallacy of complex question. Let's see here, sa fallacy of complex question. Nagsalita na ang asawa ni Uncle Fred. Ang sabi ng asawa ni Uncle Fred ay, who among your relatives are you contemplating to kill next? So, fallacy of complex question is you're actually accuse someone, okay? Because parang inassume mo na yun na yung totoo. Because you propose euthanasia, you're actually contemplating to kill to kill your relatives. That's why we're asking you who is next. That is a fallacy of complex question, and it happens every time. It happens every time. Okay? Halimbawa, you have someone or magkakaibigan kayo, and then your friend broke up with his boyfriend or with her boyfriend, I mean. Tapos, without the knowledge of your other friend, ginawa niya ngayon yung ex ng other friend mo. Medyo, medyo cheesy, right? Tapos, ang nangyari, nung nagka-meet ulit sila, nakita netong friend na to, yung other friend mo na jowa niya, yung ex niya na. Oh, medyo magulo ba? So, si friend 1, yung may ex na sa jowa, ay yung ex niya, napunta kay friend 2, naging jowa niya. Tapos, nung nag-meet sila, kasama yung boyfriend ni friend 2, nagulat siya na si friend 1, yung ex ni friend 1, jowa na pala ni friend 2. Ay, wow. And then, sobrang inis ni friend 1. Tinanong niya ngayon si friend 2. So, sino naman yung susulitin mo next? That is a fallacy of complex question. That you are actually assuming the truth na si friend 2, manunulot pa siya ng iba pang boyfriend boyfriend ng friend nyo para maging jowa niya. That is fallacy of complex question. Now, let's proceed with petitio principii. Petitio principii. Okay. Biglang nagsalita ngayon yung isa mo pang uncle. Sabi ni uncle, removing the life support system of your Uncle Fred is wrong because it is wrong to take the life of another human being. Even if the motive is to alleviate pain and suffering, only God is the right. Okay. So, fallacy or petitio principii is actually the fallacy of begging the question. Okay, it's a logical fallacy in which a premise is assumed to be true without warrant, or which is to be proved is implicitly taken for granted. So, sinasabi dito, if euthanasia is wrong, you must produce reasons that will support your claim. Smuggling the conclusion in the premise set will not strengthen the argument. You can support the claim of the conclusion by using the conclusion as a premise. For some strange reasons, circular reasoning of this sort is common. Okay? For example, removing or yung sinabi na nga ni Tito na removing the life support of your system or life support system of your Uncle Fred is wrong. Kasi tatanggalin mo yung life ng human being. And you're not allowed to do it. You're not a god. That is petitio principii. Na kung saan, ibig sabihin, you don't have the right, okay, or you are wrong, your argument or the euthanasia is wrong because it is wrong. It is wrong in the eyes of God, it is wrong in the eyes of man. Okay. Now, let's proceed with fallacy of fake dilemma. Ito na. Ito na yung fake dilemma na ibabato sa'yo ni mother mo. So, either you do not value human life or you do not love your Uncle Fred. It seems to us that you do not love your Uncle Fred. Therefore, you do not value human life. So, fallacy of false dilemma provides you either this or that language. Tapos, gagawin niya isang thought. Alright? For example na lang, yun nga, either do you not value human life or you do not love your Uncle Fred. Tapos, in the end, ginawa niya din isang matinding or malakasang claim na, you know what? You don't actually love your Uncle Fred. That's why you don't value human life. That is fallacy of dilemma. It also comes with 3 dilemma. Okay, and that was called false trilemma, which provides 3 choices. Yun nga, 3 yung choices na nagpe-present more than sa nag-exist. Okay? Though it's not really your fault, right? You're providing that option, but your mother really despised that idea, and they provided you this type of dilemma. It's false dilemma because it's never, or the fact that they're actually um parang nilalabanan nila yung judgment mo. That is fallacy of false dilemma. And then finally, we have non sequitur. Non sequitur is actually the following premises, or ito yung other words for the arguments that you cannot remember. For example, when you make someone make an argument and then you're trying to figure out what type of fallacy argument is that. When you can't remember, you can use non sequitur as an alternative because it means the same thing. Okay? So, to recap, all fallacious arguments share one essential thing in common. The conclusion does not follow from the premises. Right? So, ibig sabihin, lahat ng uh, fallacious argument does not support their conclusion does not support the main idea of what's happening. And non sequitur is the best word you can actually you can replace a forgotten fallacy argument. So always remember that. So that ends with our module 5. We're gonna proceed now with Miss Durig for the module 6 and module 7.
Good morning, everyone. Let us proceed to Module 6, entitled Theory of Appraisal for Simple Arguments. This module serves as a guide on how we are going to evaluate arguments. In our everyday lives, we may consciously or unconsciously making argument. Most of the choices and decisions we make are composed of reasons. However, those reasons that we make can either be rational or just a mere search of irrationality. Thus, the importance of studying the topic at hand. The aim of this module is so that we can practice rational and critical thinking to make our lives better by being logical. To start off, let us start by defining what is the theory of appraisal. It has been discussed already by previous reporters, but let us discuss it briefly today. Theory of appraisal essentially means or essentially aims to assess the strengths and weaknesses of an argument presented. So it means that ine-evaluate natin yung merit ng arguments. In Module 2 of Unit 4, it has been stated that the task of theory of appraisal aims to answer the following. 1 is, how should an argument be evaluated and criticized? 2, how do we determine whether the premise is relevant or not? And 3, what are the appropriate standards for measuring argument strength? So first, let us go to the empirical argument. Again, empirical argument is an argument based on experience or observation. In the book of Acuña, empirical argument is branched into two, the simple empirical argument and the inductive argument. I will discuss this in one go simply because both arguments possess similar elements. The only difference is that one argument is more complex than the other. Now let us look in the empirical argument presented in the screen. Notice that most of the premise are empirical. One is based on a general statement that most UP freshmen of batch 1998 come from poor families, and the second is a more specific one, which is Isabel is a UP freshman, batch 1998, enrolled in Philo 1. Now we ask the following. How should an empirical argument be evaluated and criticized? First, it it has been said that we assess an empirical argument by first looking in the conclusion. So here, the conclusion is more likely than not, Isabel come from a poor family. But we may ask, is this true? To answer this, we need to look at the premises that support the conclusion, namely the first two premises. Now, how do we determine whether the premise is relevant or not? To do this, we need to ask ourselves that if the premise is true, would it provide a support to the conclusion? So let us examine the first premise. Most UP freshmen of batch 1998 come from poor families. If this is true, would it support the truth or the truth of the conclusion? And yes, but actually we need to question kasi yung most, di ba, when it comes to most, we need to have at least more than 50% of the population to say that most UP freshmen come from poor families. It is relevant, but um, we need to we need to ascertain if it is sufficient. Next is that Isabel is a UP freshman batch 1998 enrolled in Philo 1. If this is true, would it support the truth of the conclusion? And actually, the answer here is no kasi yung pagiging yung pagiging yung pagiging enrolled ni Isabel sa Philo 1 class is walang connect sa pagiging mahirap niya. So in short, we can say that this empirical argument presented to us is actually weak. But suppose that there was an additional premise, namely that 80% of Philo 1 students batch 1998 come from poor families. So dito, nagbabago yung strength ng argument because there is an additional evidence na present. And nung nagkaroon na ng third additional premise, yung premise number 2 na before irrelevant now becomes relevant. And so the conclusion and the argument in itself has a more strong foundation than the earlier version. In short, according to the theory of appraisal, we measure the strength of empirical argument by the use of evidence. Next is the analytic argument. Analytic argument is more direct and uncomplicated than empirical because the conclusion must either be true or false only. So according to theory of appraisal, the truth of analytic argument depends on the definition or well-formed formula of formal sciences. Now look at the example on the screen. A father is a male parent, one is a male parent, therefore one is a father. Notice that the premise 1, a father is a male parent, is a mere definition. We can see here that either one is a male parent or he is not. There is no room for probability. To be able to determine the truth of an argument, we need to look for either the definition or the well-formed formula. Moreover, unlike empirical case, additional evidences do not add to the strength of the argument. Lastly is the evaluative argument. Recall that evaluative argument makes a judgment on a particular subject matter. For example, to argue whether something is good or something is moral or immoral, um, that is actually an example of evaluative argument. And in the book, it says there that most likely than not, this is the most common form of argument that we are using. So there are two kinds of argument that we can make under evaluative argument. One is the ontological argument, which is an argument based on principles. It can either be prescriptive or prescriptive, but such command have no truth value. For example, consider this. Never punish an innocent person. This argument is based on moral principle. And when we have moral principle, there is no truth value in it. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihing tama ito, hindi mo pwedeng sabihing mali ito. So, hindi rin naman siya nagbe-base sa probability. Kaya, kaya nagkaroon ng ibang aspect kasi itong evaluative argument, it rests on widely or intersubjective consensus. So notice that the premise one, which states that never punish an innocent person, is a moral principle. It is neither an empirical premise nor a definition. So one might ask how then we can measure its strength. According to the theory of appraisal, the strength of evaluative argument rests on wide public acceptance. For example, looking at the moral principle provided, we can say that it is widely accepted premise because it is already stipulated in our laws and judicial system. Therefore, if you agree on the premises, it only follows that you should agree to its conclusion. Another form of evaluative argument is the teleological argument, which is an argument based on consequences. Again, the teleological argument is an argument based on principle. Meanwhile, teleological is based on consequences. Here, an act is right if it produces desired consequences. The example given in the book is as follows. First premise, all actions in accordance with God's will are good. Second premise, the Ten Commandments are in accordance with God's will. Therefore, you ought to obey Ten Commandments. Here it is presumed that when you obey the Ten Commandments, it produces right outcome or good consequences. Thus, it must be correct. To summarize, theory of appraisal tells us that we need to evaluate empirical arguments with evidences. Meanwhile, we need to test the strength of analytical argument with or depending on its definition and well-formed formula of a system, and to test the strength of evaluative arguments based on strong intersubjective consensus. So we move on to Module 7, which is about composing complex arguments. Here, Module 7 provided a step-by-step guide on how to evaluate an argument, which is stated as follows. First, we need to examine the statement of the conclusion. Next is to analyze the claim of the conclusion. Third, compose the argument. Fourth, criticize the argument. Fifth, compose the counter-argument. And sixth, evaluate both arguments. We need to put this into practice. So take, for example, the claim here or the conclusion here, which states that most politicians are corrupt. So punta tayo sa first step, examine the statement of the conclusion. In examining the statement of the conclusion, we look at terms that have been used in the statement. So here we notice first that the the claim uses the word most, and here it uses the word politicians. So we need to clearly define who are these politicians. Are these politicians already elected or kasama yung mga running politicians? Next, we also need to clarify the definition of the word corrupt. Does that mean that the politician should be convicted or just accused? Okay na siya to qualify as corrupt. Next is we go to analysis of the claim of the conclusion. In analysis of the conclusion, we need to identify if the claim is analytical, empirical, or evaluative. Here in our case, it is empirical because the claim has a generalized conclusion already. We can say this because it uses the word most politicians, right? So having this said, we need to ask what are the required evidence to support the conclusion. So from the word most, kailangan meron tayong sapat na population to test if talaga bang most politicians are corrupt. Next is composing the argument. In composing the argument, you provide reasons as to why you claimed what you said or bakit yun yung conclusion na sinabi mo. So here we provide premises. Say for example, your conclusion is most politicians are corrupt and tinanong mo na why. then you provide reasons for that. Pwede mo sabihin na politicians are obsessed with one objective in mind, which is to win an election and stay in power. Or you can say that politicians will bribe to get adherents and other things like that, so long as it provides support to your conclusion. Next is to criticize the argument. After composing the argument, you criticize the argument. And you do this by asking if your premise is true. Totoo ba to? Ano yung mga counter examples na pwedeng i-present? Are the premises relevant? Just like kung again, pwede mo tanongin yung sarili mo na if if this premise is true, would it provide support to the conclusion? Pwede mo ring tanongin if the arguments that you've presented or if the reasons you've presented are already sufficient to support the conclusion that you claim. So after this, you need to compose the counter argument. So say for example, a counter argument to this is that pwede namang hindi lahat ng politicians are corrupt. Or we can say that walang sufficient evidence to say that most politicians are corrupt. So that in itself is you already compose a counter argument based on the criticisms that you have earlier. After that, you evaluate both arguments and ask yourself if the original or the counter argument makes more sense and more logical. So that's it for Module 7. Thank you.